Have you ever hesitated before buying your dream orchid just because you thought you didn't have the perfect growing conditions for it? Well, don't, because in today's video, I'm going to show you how I got one of my favorite warm to hot growing orchids to flower inside just under grow lights. So this little guy is the northern form of Dendrobium caniculatum, and they're most commonly found in Queensland and the Northern Territory. You can also get the Papua New Guinea variety that, as its name also suggests, is most commonly found sort of in Papua New Guinea, but I believe we can get that form here in Australia as well. And that particular form is slightly different in its coloration, main differences being it's more white with sort of yellow tips, and the labellum is sort of yellow and purpley colour, as opposed to the northern form, which is kind of more yellowy brown with a little bit of a pinkish lip. Caniculatums are also commonly referred to as the tea tree orchids because they're almost exclusively found growing here on Melaleuca trees. And as many orchids are, they are epiphytes, which means they're a plant that grows on another plant. So these ones are growing on the Melaleuca trees. So I do find it easier to grow mounted than in a pot. But if you're like me and want to make your life a little bit easier in terms of watering and making sure that the plant is able to dry out in between waterings, growing them mounted is going to be a much easier option. I think it just gives you a little bit of an extra edge when it comes to controlling the moisture on the roots as well, because the water is still able to soak the roots and hydrate the orchid without it being suffocated when sitting in a pot, even if you're using something like chunky bark or a rocky mix in there. For me, it just gives that little bit of extra peace of mind that I really have control over what's going on. So as we now know that this orchid does grow in sort of Queensland and the Northern Territory kind of area, it is used to fairly consistent warm to hot temperatures. So temperatures being around sort of 28 to 35 degrees Celsius during the day, sort of in the summer, and in winter it's not too much cooler in those sort of regions of Australia. So you're kind of looking at 24 to 26 degrees with a little bit of a cool down overnight to around 19 degrees Celsius. Whereas where I live around Sydney, it's a little bit cooler than the conditions of tropical North Queensland. We are, I think, considered an intermediate subtropical climate here. So that's characterized by warm summers and fairly mild winters. Mind you, the most recent winter that we've just come out of was actually almost uncharacteristically cool for Sydney's normal conditions. So we got a lot of overnight minimums below 10 degrees Celsius. So this orchid was outside on my balcony in my apartment, but I knew that as soon as the temperatures started cooling down below probably about 15 degrees Celsius overnight, to bring it inside so that it didn't get too much shock. So you definitely want to try your best to mimic the growing conditions that it would get in nature to optimize its growth and flowering potential, but it definitely doesn't mean that it isn't possible to get it to grow or flower if you do have slightly different growing conditions. So I found catering for the temperature not too difficult because you can do things like bring them inside over winter to keep them as warm as possible, but the more challenging aspect of this orchid is the light requirements. So as they grow on Melaleuca trees in nature, they are therefore exposed to quite harsh, dry conditions with very bright light most of the year round. So it was a little bit of experiment, a bit of trial and error trying to get the light requirements right for this orchid, particularly in winter where I didn't want to have it outside. It was far too cold, and in my apartment I didn't receive any direct sunlight. So when I brought it inside, I just placed it as close to my grow lights as possible. I had quite a lot of orchids that I did bring inside over winter, most notably all my Vandas came inside because they're often warm to hot growers. So I already had some grow lights kind of stuck up onto the roof anyway. These guys are fairly similar to a lot of other dendrobiums when it comes to watering as well. So in winter, they do appreciate a period of drought or semi-drought, which also does kind of help them kick into gear when it comes to flowering as well. So from about mid-autumn to mid-spring, you really want to limit the watering if you're going to water even at all. For my caniculatum, I really only kind of misted it about once a month, and that was mainly to sort of boost humidity around the roots to help keep the bulbs nice and plump, but I wasn't kind of holding it under the tap, really thoroughly watering it or anything like that until kind of fairly recently. So it's the 31st of October today, so we're sort of in the middle of spring here in Australia at the moment, and I'm actually properly watering it about once every 2 weeks at this stage. But now that the flowers are kind of finishing, it's nice and warm outside, it will be transitioned outside over the next week or so, which will also mean that the watering schedule will start to increase. But over winter, I really just had it up nice and high next to that grow light, and directly underneath it, I had my humidifier, which you can see behind me, It's not on at the moment, but I had that kind of on a medium setting just to help boost the humidity for all of the orchids in the general vicinity as just kind of a little bit of extra support. And then from about kind of mid-spring to the following autumn, they do go through a period of fairly rapid growth. They are quite hungry, so you will be needing to sort of water and fertilize them quite regularly, which is nice and easy to keep track of when they're on a little mount like this one is. So you can thoroughly water and fertilize them. They'll dry out, and then you can do the same thing a few times a week. And because I have watered it a handful of times now that the weather's starting to warm up, you will start to see some of their root tips activate. So you can kind of see there that little green root tip. I think there's also one on the back here as well. Yes, there is. Just here. You can kind of see that. So those little root tips are indicating to me that it's starting to come out of dormancy and it's time to start slowly increasing the watering. It's also really important with these orchids to not cut off any of the bulbs. It is a natural aging process for the bulbs as well to lose their leaves. So don't be alarmed. It doesn't mean the plant's dying. And these old bulbs will store a lot of the nutrients that's needed for the plant as well to grow and flower. So definitely don't touch them, leave them there. At some point as the plant continues to age, it will probably get rid of some of the old bulbs. Like you can see on here, some of these ones are quite shriveled, but they'll just shrivel up and fall off on their own as they need to. So if there is an orchid that you absolutely have your heart set on, but you're worried you don't have the right growing conditions, just try it. See where it grows in the wild, try to understand what its requirements might be, and then just adapt them to your growing conditions as best as you can. I'm lucky enough now to have been able to move house, and we do have a little bit of a garden outside where I have access to full sun. So I will be moving this little guy outside in the next couple of weeks, as I said, but I really just wanted to demonstrate to you today that it is possible if you only have grow lights, if you only have an indoor grow space, you can still definitely get these highlight orchids to flower on your own. So don't let that stop you from growing something that you really, really love. It's worthwhile giving it a go, and the reward of the flowers is even sweeter when you've kind of had to bend the rules a little bit to get it to work. So yeah, that's all I've got for you today, guys. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. Please give me a like and press subscribe if you'd like to see more of my orchid content, and leave a nice comment down below if you'd like to. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.